Hello, my name is Meredith Kutz, a Professional Development Associate here at NACE. I'd like to welcome you to today's event, The Radically Affordable Degree, the Marriage of Online Learning and Remote Work. It is my pleasure to introduce JP Moran from Coursera for Campus.
Thanks, Meredith. We're super excited to have everybody here. Thanks again for joining. We're going to be taking you through quite hopefully an interesting conversation. The topic is going to be the radically affordable degree. Next. So today's agenda, we're going to cover a couple of topics here. One, obviously, the radical affordable degree and the Boise State gap year, some insights and solutions from Coursera, and then we're going to close out with a fireside chat and some questions and answers and some closing remarks. But first, I'd like to introduce you to our two speakers today. First is Gordon Jones, the founding dean of the College of Innovation and Design at Boise State University. The College of Innovation and Design is a diploma-granting college innovating new cross-disciplinary majors, applied learning opportunities, and new electives designed to enhance the college affordability, access, and post-graduation outcomes. Boise State University is currently rolling out Coursera as one of the online backbones offered to students who opt in to take a gap year. They are offering 5 tracks to the students to choose from their path. Jeff, who we'll hear from shortly after Gordon joined Coursera as a CEO in June of 2017. He previously served for 18 years as the founding CEO of Financial Engines. Jeff holds an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business and a bachelor's degree in economics and English from Stanford University. With that being said, first thing we want to do is make sure that we can get these two speakers a little bit more comfortable in terms of how you guys are dealing with COVID today. So here's a first poll for everyone. What's your institution's biggest challenge? A, student employability. B, cost management. Capacity, faculty development, access, or innovation. Looking forward to hearing what some of these challenges are from everyone. Just we figured a lot of student employability issues that everybody's challenged with today, specifically in the environment where we're possibly losing out on internships and things of that nature. Nice, couple more seconds here. We'll let everybody chime in. Perfect. Lots of student employability issues. But it looks like innovation is a top leader there too. Perfect. Second, we'll run into the next question, is which learning outcomes resonates with you the most? Are you looking to learn how to produce job-ready students in a COVID-19 impacted market, discover how you create an affordable degree program without sacrificing some of the revenue that you're used to generating, or learn how to create a gap year program for students who choose to defer starting college? Much of the same, very big impacted market, and how we can actually help these students today. Well, hopefully our two speakers will be able to give you guys a little bit of innovation and insights in terms of what they're seeing in the market. I'm going to turn it over to Gordon, who will hopefully drop some knowledge on everybody in terms of what they're doing at Boise State with the radically affordable degree. Gordon?
JP, thank you so much. If we could turn the slide to the next slide. I want to take a moment to talk about, first of all, I want to thank you for having me. This is such NACE as an organization, and I think this function of helping our students prepare themselves both academically, co-curricularly for being ready for the post-graduation next step, which I'm confident all of us on this call know for the vast majority of students, it's going to be employment. As a way of securing economic empowerment, that this is a very important topic and one I'm pleased and appreciate the chance to speak to. I want to talk about 2 specific programs you've heard in the title, but before I do, I want to start with this slide, because really what I'm here to talk about is basically the idea that there's a lot of latitude we have at our disposal. And Coursera is certainly a partner of choice for my university through my college, but there's really areas that I want us to be keeping in mind, because while I may share about a radically affordable degree path we're working on, a gap year that we've implemented, I think it's left to you, the audience, to be thinking about in your own areas how you can be utilizing, either as a way of achieving the same goals that I may call out here, or in new areas that you may be interested or may be very relevant to your institutions. And so I thought of 4 areas where I see embracing a Coursera as a key example. I'll use Coursera, but ultimately both the more broad terms of online modality, third-party high-quality partners. It's really, there's 4 things I think of that offer value for impact in our universities. The one is the ability to expand the academic content areas that our universities or colleges or institutions may be not currently offering that we now can do. I think this is a key area. Many of our students may be asking for things that, quite frankly, we're not able to hire or offer faculty expertise or co-curricular experiences in those areas. The second is expanding curricular capacity. I've been in 2 particularly high institutions, both at the elite level, but also in the public university level. Both actually run into this issue of startup costs. What does it take to actually get something going? We may have that idea of faculty expertise, but ultimately there are limited resources, and our ability to step into those may be either delayed, dreams delayed, or actually canceled. And so, and a partner, let's say like Coursera, I think is a very powerful vehicle where we can extend curricular capacity without having to incur startup costs up front, and maybe buy us time in the event that we want to do this later, or choose to move on to other opportunities. The third is this idea of jumpstarting your online options. I would argue that we are most likely, many participants on this call are committed to place-based learning. We believe in the value of students being on campus in a more immersive or in a face-to-face environment. I would also, though, like to share my personal view that while we may love in person, and we should absolutely emphasize that, smart universities are also going to learn to love online and figure out how to lean into it. These modalities don't need to be at odds with each other. And so if you're not aggressively or successfully entering online as a modality for students, I think that's a third category you can explore options for your students if that's your institution. And then lastly, this idea of low-cost offerings. And what I mean by this is we all, I'm sure, are not pleased with the rising cost of higher ed. There are many players that are involved that affect affordability for our students. I know we call out in our public arena the idea of public funding opportunities, whether that be at the state, local, or federal level. But I also think we as institutions, smart institutions, are going to have to add their own voice to what solutions they want to bring to their students. And specifically this idea of bending the cost curve down is a term I use. So seeing what we can do to make sure that our students have affordability options for high quality degrees from our institutions. So those are the categories. Let me talk briefly about 2 specific embodiments. If we could go to the next slide, please. I want to talk about the first one is this idea of a radically affordable degree. We're very comfortable at our institution talking and exploring the idea of differential tuition, but almost invariably the idea of charging different prices for different majors, but invariably it almost always involves charging more to students for those degrees that we either believe have more commercial value for those students or cost us more to put on. I have yet to hear conversations where we acknowledge that the lower cost delivery could be, or how do we deliver a lower cost option with meaningful, high quality, branded from our institution degrees. So the thesis here was we have an ability to think about how can we create affordability. Now at Boise State, we're going to do like a 2-step dance in this. So the first part of this is this slide for getting towards a radical affordable degree. The first is we've designed a bachelor's, and we are working through our approval process through my college, the college I'm privileged to lead, where we're going to offer a bachelor's degree that's effectively going to be stackable certificates, degree clusters, credit hour clusters, 12 to 16 hours, where stackable certificates, a choice for students. They can add up a select number for those of you that aren't familiar with the term, and that becomes effectively their major. And those stackable certificates are curated course lists that allow our faculty leaders to to deliver that high quality knowledge that they have through those certificate clusters. Embedded in a number of our certificates, though, is we specifically as we have industry certifications. We also try to be very comfortable. Our student body at Boise State, 25,000 students, about 30% are out of state. In-state tuition is about $8,100, and yet our state's income levels about average income about 24,000. So that's not a low-cost tuition to begin with. And we have about 30% first in family. So anything we can do to offer flexibility on credit for prior learning, experiential education, we're also in a posture to build. And then lastly, the idea that we're going to wrap this with academic skill, career planning, and other opportunities. Again, recognizing that our belief is students looking for affordability are also ones who we believe are going to be wanting to look for economic empowerment post-graduation. Part of that is helping them not be saddled with debt. So the first part is starting with this idea of a skeleton of stackable certificates. The second part, if we can go to the next slide, please, is integrating affordability. And this is where the partnership with Coursera is integral out of the gate. We hope to be able to bring in a cluster of curated, sort of a playlist of courses that come from Coursera that will represent one of those certificate clusters. Now, we may choose to mix in some of our own Boise State courses, or plus Coursera, or 100% Coursera. In all cases, we're going to wrap Boise State advising and the ability to integrate that experience from an advising, both academic advising and also tutoring. So Boise State's a complete partner in this mix. But we also believe, because of the affordability that Coursera offers, we can actually start to think about how we lower student tuition through that degree. And without a Coursera, frankly, the structure and culture of many institutions, including the one I'm at, it gets a lot more complicated if I'm trying to go after in-person differential tuition that's downward. And so the idea is this two-step process, but the bigger message here is, how can we as institutions have solutions for our students who really need us to have solutions around affordability, and not wait for only external third-party stakeholders to come alongside. Now, I love it all, but I think we as institutions can think creatively, and this is one embodiment I want to share with you. I'm going to talk about the second embodiment now, if you can go to the next slide, and that's called the Bronco Gap Year. The vision here in a COVID environment that hit was recognizing, and we've talked also about this idea of universities, and I would, again, my view, and so I'm using the word smart universities, reflecting my opinion, but smart universities are ones that are going to be learning how to serve more students in more creative ways at all different life stages. And so we've always had in our mind the idea of bridging between the secondary education level and higher ed. We've recognized, if it's like your institutions, some of our students are not well prepared coming in. So the overall thesis of a gap year type experience we've kind of played around with, but with COVID, we've accelerated this in believing that we want to attract students who may not be well served by the traditional academic model through that affordable degree, but we see the gap year as that bridge. And so to our Idaho students, 1/3 of whom are making lower than $35,000, our in-state fully loaded tuition, room and board is $18K. We know that 2/3 of our students who are Pell eligible leave without a degree. So what can we do to help with that preparation? Our thesis was, can we step into their experience and help them get prepared and ready, especially in a COVID environment virtually, that can have them ready to hit the ground, especially for those that are a little bit nervous about this environment. So if we can go to the next slide. There are 4 components to the gap year, the design. And to be clear, another important point here is, and COVID's a great example, we pulled this together in about 2.5 months. And so it's another variable I want to call out, the importance of us as universities. This is an experiment that we are well designing, but we also look to each semester to improve it. And I want to be clear, I'm not holding our faculty partners to perfection out of the gate. But the thinking I've really enjoyed in this is 4 components. There's a community and a coaching component. For any gap year participant, you have a faculty and a peer mentor, a student, current Boise State student, and a faculty member who's assigned to be your mentor, and you get an academic and a career advisor from Boise State. So immediately we're putting around this sort of primary care physician model around these gap year participants. We also then ask them to sign up for one of 4 tracks. They may be interested in education, social entrepreneurship, a design your own, which by the way, many of the students have picked, and we will work with them to design that. But we also invite them then, those pathways are curated to Coursera content. And I'll get into that in a minute, because we offer credit for prior learning, which many of our institutions on this call may offer. We use that as the vehicle for conferring credit to those Coursera courses that these gap year students complete. The experience of the gap year includes Coursera courses, community experiences, and then reflective experiences with these faculty and peer mentors. It's about $1,200. I didn't put the price in, but at Boise State, it's $1,200 for the full year, 2 semesters. And it's, for 2 semesters, and we scholarship it down to $500 for those that are in need. So we've tried to create tremendous radical affordability, if you will, through that gap year. But we also didn't want to have students in a no credit environment. We thought this could be a way to help jumpstart them, get them ready. So what's interesting, my last slide is going to talk about what we found out. And if you can go to the next slide. And that's that we've had a tremendous amount of inquiries in the 8 weeks that we rolled this out. Before it started, 137 inquiries. We had 60 some deposits, 16 enrolled. Interestingly, 3/4, one of our findings is this is yes for some of those gap year students between high school and college, but interestingly, it's also a retention tool. And I don't know if this is a one-time lump because we've just rolled it out. And so we're seeing 3/4 of our students are actually Boise State students who are thinking they would have stepped away from college. That melt that we experience, if any of the other institutions on this call experiencing that, this is actually proving to be a very intriguing area for us, is to point some of our current struggling students in this direction as a way to get their feet under them and not disappear from our radar and leaving us losing them. What's attractive here, I think, is Coursera, because in the absence of being able to offer very quickly these curated playlists that come from the hundreds of academic partner providers through Coursera, we're able to offer them substantive academic experience. It's also attractive to students who are nervous about online learning. And we can talk more about that in Q&A, but the experience is high quality, and we can certainly wrap our own institutions around it, as you've seen us do in this program. So hopefully these are 2 embodiments that give you a sense of the creative application. In this case, I've talked about going after affordability with a radical affordability degree, and then thinking about how we can better serve our students who may either not be prepared coming in or may be academically at risk through this gap year program, which you can take for either a semester or a full year. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff to share a little more.
Great, thank you so much, Gordon. I think that this format makes a lot of sense. Love to see the poll results. Clearly, starting with some case examples before I give maybe a broader overview is a great way to see what's possible. You know, before we get to Q&A, and most of the session here is going to be Q&A, I thought it might be just useful for the audience to get a sense for what's possible these days. I mean, things are moving so quickly that I thought it would be useful just to say kind of what's happening at Coursera. Of course, there are many other options out there. Gordon, of course, we love having you as a partner. But this part here just is about what is Coursera and what are we doing that might be advantageous to folks. I saw on the attendee list a lot of folks from the Career Services Center. There's a lot of interesting things that we're doing that might be relevant. Next slide. So at a really high level, you could think of Coursera as an ecosystem. Many of you probably know it was started in 2012 with 2 professors, and they put some computer science courses online, and people from all over the world came. And this was sort of the birth, along with edX and Udacity, of MOOCs, massively open online courses. Since 2012, things have changed a lot. This ecosystem really has 3 sides. It includes 70 2 million learners from around the world who are now learning online. And I'll tell you, COVID has been a huge tailwind. It's causing a lot of people who have had their schools closed and who have had their offices closed to do a lot more learning online. As Gordon said, the educators who come to Coursera to actually offer courses, they're some of the best universities in the world. And I'll show you a little list of some of our partners and some of the courses. But one of the neat things about this is I really think about what Coursera can help do as an enablement partner is really helping colleges and universities help other colleges and universities. It's really just a platform for higher ed to kind of collaborate and better serve the world. We have 150 universities and 50 industry partners. These are companies they'll talk a little bit more about, like Google and IBM and Salesforce, who are also offering very job relevant courses on Coursera. And then the final piece is really, a lot of people don't know this, but after offering Coursera directly to individuals, 5 years ago, Coursera launched Coursera for Business. This is a version of Coursera where our partners' courses can be used to upskill and reskill employees at work. And then we launched Coursera for Government to help governments with workforce development programs. And then just last year, in October of 2019, we launched Coursera for Campus. And that's the version of Coursera that Gordon has been using to implement the radically affordable degree and the gap year. One of the neat things about this, though, and I think especially for this audience, I want to point this out. We literally have 2,300 companies using Coursera to upskill and reskill actual employees in actual jobs. So we know what software engineers are, what skills they're learning, what courses they're taking. We know what marketers are doing to improve their digital marketing. We know what operations people are doing to learn more about supply chains. And we can take what we're learning about employers teaching new skills to their current employees, and we can point that over to students and say, if you want to get a job as a product manager, here are the skills that product managers have, and here are the courses that you can take to learn the skills to be a product manager, or to be a sales manager, or to be a marketer, or a software engineer. Next slide. This is just a quick snapshot to say that most of our university partners are in North America and Europe, but we do have partners in Latin America, in India, in Africa, in Russia, in China, and Australia, pretty much all over the world. Next slide. The platform that Gordon was talking about really centers on a few key things. Number one is this ready-made, ready-to-license content so that you could get a program up and running quickly without that massive startup cost. A lot of universities are thinking, I've got to build all my own online content. Not true. There is turnkey, ready-made, high-quality university content that is available right now. We have 4,500 courses ready to go. And then a lot of universities say, yeah, but I don't want to license all of it. I want to start building my own content. You can do that with Coursera for Campus for free. Your faculty, your grad students, they can be authoring both courses and projects, I'll describe that in a sec, for free for your own students. So it's really kind of license it quickly and then build it yourself if you'd like to. A lot of career-oriented campus professionals say, God, I'd like to complement some of the more theoretical work that my professors and students are going through on campus with some hands-on, practical, tool-based skills. We have something called Coursera Labs. I'll give you a very quick snapshot of how your students can build hands-on projects. And what we're hearing from students is before they interview for a job, they're often doing these hands-on projects of how to build a website, how to run Google Ads, how to do an SQL, do queries on an SQL database. And we have now 800 projects. So they're sort of brushing up for their interviews by taking these hands-on projects, which makes them feel a lot more familiar, fluent, and credible in front of interviewers. And that gets to the job-ready skills. And of course, as I mentioned, it's a scalable platform. Next slide. Here's a quick look at the catalog. It's pretty broad. It mostly focuses on business, technology, and data science. That's where most of the demand is, but we have a big healthcare catalog that's growing. Also social sciences, also liberal arts, arts and humanities. Altogether, 4,500 courses. Inside these courses, there's 150,000 short lecture videos. So it's broken into small bite-sized chunks. And it's not just the videos, it's also assessments. And to Gordon's point around having independent study programs, there are assessments that can be used as a basis for evaluating whether or not the learning objectives have been accomplished. And with that private authoring, if a school wants to use the lectures right out of the Coursera partner courses, but author your own assessments, you can certainly do that. So it's a mix and match of saying, I want to take the ready-made content, but our professors would like to make sure that our learning objectives are met. You can author just a private assessment that sits on top of a public course. Next slide. Altogether, the system kind of looks like this. We've got 4,500 courses from our partners. These are about 12 to 15 hours long, depending on how intensively a student uses them. Usually takes a few weeks to get through. Specializations are a series of courses that teach a skill in a little bit more detail. Professional certificates usually come from our industry partners. Our university partners do offer full online master's and bachelor's degrees on Coursera as well. And then these hands-on projects I just talked about are much shorter, much more applied. We have 800 of them now. We'll be at 1,000 by the end of the year. And these are a real nice complement to those courses. Next slide. Just quickly on guided projects. We started offering Coursera Labs and guided projects in April. Already we've had over 2 million enrollments in guided projects. 80% of them are from students. So students are really looking, when it comes to employability, they're looking to be able to say, even though I don't have any work experience, I can talk about how I built that Jupyter notebook or how I used Tableau to analyze a certain data set. You know, whatever the job that they're interviewing for requires in terms of the tools they'll use, guided projects are a great way for them to get their hands on the software for free. They don't have to buy the software. They don't have to download the software. They don't have to download any data sets. It's all right there in this virtual desktop that sits in a browser. And then they've got this deliverable that they can actually show to an interviewer and say, look, this is what I built using Visual Code Studio. Next slide. And then finally, just to wrap it up, we've got a number of industry partners, including some of the biggest tech companies, who've looked at where there are in-demand entry-level jobs that can be done digitally. So our first big professional certificate was the Google IT Support Certificate. It's a 5-course series designed for people who do not yet have any job experience in IT. And we rolled this out with Google in 2018. Over 300,000 students have gone through it. We've also set up hiring partnerships so that there's a career pathway. When you finish the Google IT certificate, we have a number of companies who are looking to hire IT professionals. They like this curriculum. They will interview some of the top grads in order to fill some of their open IT support positions. Next slide. We also have degree pathways. So a number of universities are now actually extending academic credit towards a bachelor's in computer science for people who have finished the Google IT support. So this industry university collaboration is a big deal. We started with Google IT in 2018. IBM has now launched a number of these professional certificates. Facebook and Salesforce just launched 2 to help people get into marketing and sales. Google just announced another 3 that will be coming in January, and Intuit just announced for people that might want to go into finance, a digital bookkeeper professional certificate. But it's really a great way to do digital skilling for entry-level jobs, and it's a nice combination of academia and industry. Next slide. So that's really just a quick overview of Coursera. And I think now, I think we're going to open this up for Q&A, and hopefully this is where some of the more exciting part of the session will actually go. So questions for Gordon and or me about what we've been up to. JP?
Yeah, and I think as we start to prepare, as these questions will, I'm sure, flood in for you guys, there's one question that I do have for the audience. And if there's one problem that's arisen from COVID-19 that you guys would like to be solved, what would it be? Across the United States, we've been talking to several educators, and they all have their own opinions in terms of where they would like to take their universities or community colleges. But a lot of them center around the fact that they just want to provide job-ready skills for these students as they enter into the marketplace. So I'm curious, before we get started, if there's anybody that would love to throw in some chat about what they're up against and what they're thinking about today. I'll give it a second here. And in the meantime, Gordon, I got a question that's come in here for you. As students are entering Boise State, how are you thinking about producing job-ready graduates in a COVID-19 impacted marketplace today?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, we're all living COVID real time. So the long-term implications, we're gonna all live together. But I do think the short-term one is it's putting even more pressure that I'm sure we all felt prior to COVID on answering this question from students and ultimately either parents or sponsors of these students, which is, what am I going to get if I go to college? That may not be a question that every career office person at Harvard gets, but at many of our universities, and hopefully most of the ones on this one, that's a key question. I think at Boise State, it's something I feel very passionate about. And so one of the things in my college, we've tried to really develop a robust set of 4-credit electives. Worried about the ability for many students who are already working part-time jobs that are meant to be funding their education, not necessarily their career post-college, having the capacity to engage in many co-curricular opportunities that might enhance job readiness. And so one avenue I've used at Boise State is start to create electives that are courses for credit where you can actually get that job ready, skills and experience. Bottom line, I think any university should be thinking hard, not just about the knowledge transfer, the intellectual transformation we're always committed to doing, but how can we also ensure there are skills and experience that can allow for differentiation? And so to do that, for example, I've initiated and started a program called Work U. That's now my colleagues in the career office at Boise State oversee. We graduated that program, but the thesis there was, a Northeastern or a pure co-op program where you have to drop out of school to go into, or you step out of school to go immersive full-time into an employer. It's not a reality for many of our students and maybe many students of institutions of people who are on this call. So let's create a 4-credit hour course. We now have 55 to 60 employers who take for 10 to 15 hours a student, and they can take the course for 3 or 4 credit hours with an in-person course, wrap the skills around it, and they can take the class up to 4 times. That's building skills and experience. What's interesting is we look at how could a Coursera assessment, or how could we do projects, guided projects, that may be additional layers we add on or substitutes that can expand our capacity, because I also believe we've got to be serving people more aggressively remotely in our state. We have a very big rural population. So my longer than quick, but hopefully shorter than long answer is address it through for credit opportunities.
Yeah, and just in that rural area, we've talked about it, I know in the past, Gordon, but the ability to be able to download these courses and take them offline with the Coursera platform, I've heard many times has been really helpful. And I know it's kind of one of the questions I was out there, but another one of the questions.
And JP, just really quick, since it came up from Florida, let me just jump in really quickly. We have 10 million learners from India on the platform. We have learners in Africa and Latin America. And in many places of the world, including in the US, there isn't reliable access to the internet. And in many places in the world, people don't have a desktop computer. Maybe they only have a mobile device. And in many places in the world, there's intermittent access to power. So lots of power grids are kind of up and down around the world. And so over the last 8 years at Coursera, we've had to try to figure out this issue. Now, we don't have a way to solve the problem if someone has no computing device, no phone, no nothing. And we don't have a way to do it if they have no power ever, and if they have no connectivity ever. But what we do have is an ability for every one of the courses to be not only accessed via a mobile device, which can be used whether the power is on or off, but also you can download any course onto your mobile device and actually do the learning offline. And then when you're back to connectivity, you sync up the results again. This allows someone when they have, by the way, there's also sometimes limited access to private space. So people will often have to go to a place to find privacy where maybe there's not connectivity. And so being able to download on a mobile device, go offline, learn offline on your phone, and then when you're back to a Wi-Fi hotspot, get back online is big. And what we're working on right now for people who also don't have very affordable access to data plans is a way to actually download courses at much lower data usage by using certain compression tricks that our engineers are working on. So low data downloads, we expect to be doing in Q4 or Q1, but this is a huge issue. We've already made a lot of progress, and there's more progress to come.
Awesome. One of the other questions that came in for you, Jeff, that I would love for you to touch on is, we focus quite heavily on this presentation a little bit on the IT industry and the demand that's been identified. What is Coursera doing today in and around some of the other degrees in arts and humanities?
There are quite a few hundred courses in arts and humanities. We don't at this point, well, I should say our partners, our university partners, have not offered a standard liberal arts degree on Coursera. I think that mostly the focus has been on some of the more job-ready computer science or data science or software engineering, et cetera. I think, though, that the catalog right now, as Gordon said, could certainly be co-curricular. It could supplement any liberal arts program. And I think another thing that's pretty nice about it is, for a lot of liberal arts majors, I was an English major. Now, my dad told me, I don't want to pay for your degree unless you also get something else so you can get a job. Well, I said, but I love English, so I'm going to be an English major. And I also did a track in quantitative economics. I think for a lot of liberal arts majors, doing your liberal arts degree, but getting a professional certificate from a Google or an IBM or a Salesforce or an Intuit will provide just a little bit more job relevant credential that sits right next to your liberal arts degree. So we don't have liberal arts degrees right now. We do have a lot of arts and humanities courses. And I think some of these certificate programs would blend really nicely with a liberal arts degree.
Perfect. And Gordon, one of the questions that's coming in from a lot of the folks right now is, they are aware of a lot of the conversations that we're having today in terms of technology, how important it is, making sure that we are lining up the students with some type of certificate or job-ready skills. However, a lot of the folks inside the institutions that they're working with aren't as comfortable with these types of things. So how did you explain the importance of this and start to overcome some of the challenges internally at your organization to get everybody on board with this?
I think there's the rationale, and then there's the strategy of how I've approached it. I think the rationale is a little more simple in just trying to share with those who may not be aware, just through numbers and facts, the embracing of online learning as a modality, of the use of online. Often just looking at our students when they're not in your class, you get a sense for their technology nativeness, the comfort and the ease that so often I think objections have to do with an individual's personal experience and their perception that the way they experienced either education or life independent maybe technology. But I think the strategy in a university, to be a little more specific, I think the sort of training wheels approach, I think is what I've done is, again, we have a partnership. I've signed an agreement in COVID with our provost, who at first raises an eyebrow, but what I shared was, what if one of our faculty members gets sick, teaching a course? I need to slip in something that could offer them. We had students stranded in Europe when COVID hit. I need coursework for them. They're no longer able to be studying at those institutions. They've got to come home. We don't have the capacity. We don't know where they're going to go. So there's ways you can start, if nothing else, with the idea that a Coursera, or, I just generically, if you had another partner, but a Coursera can be a very quick option that can step into the breach if you have it. Or if you're not teaching in a curricular area, you're a small liberal arts university, I need a data sciences class. I can't hire someone. I'm 1,100 students in Minnesota or wherever. So you can fill in expertise where you may not be prepared to bring it on campus in person. I think beyond that, once that taste happens and people start to get comfortable, I think you're then on your way to start to think about a little more in a way that gets us thinking about broader, more strategic ways to serve students and really go after global confidence that can come through learning with students from around the world, from other faculty. There's just so many other ways that are exciting. But to your question there, it's about getting people to try and then realize it's not as inferior as some people may think. In fact, I would argue it's a perfectly equivalent modality and option.
Perfect. And Jeff, from your perspective, you obviously have the opportunity to speak to hundreds, if not thousands, of companies around the globe. As you are talking to other C-level executives, how are they looking at Coursera courses, projects, and specializations on people's resumes today?
It's not uniform. I mean, if someone says, "Oh, I have a certificate in," I'm taking a course right now from University of Amsterdam called Big History. If someone says, "I've got a certificate in Big History from University of Amsterdam," don't know that that's going to make a big difference. However, I will say, almost every employer is saying all of our employees must be lifelong learners. I do think, separate from what you're taking, I do think employers are looking for who's willing to have that growth mindset as an employee and commit to lifelong learning, who's exhibiting that they are actually doing lifelong learning, separate from what they're learning. I do think that there's a bigger and bigger premium being put on people who are curious, who are disciplined, who continue to learn throughout their careers. Now, with certain types of courses, like we have a specialization from Andrew Ng, our founder, called deep learning. It's a machine learning technique. It's very powerful. It's very much in demand by employers. You can't get a college degree in deep learning right now. It's too new, but it's very high demand. If you show up at a job, or if in your job you say, "I took and completed the deep learning specialization on Coursera," that has a huge impact on what your career opportunities might be. So I think it kind of depends on what's the domain, what's the credential, and independent from that, I think also being a lifelong learner and showing that you're taking courses and continuing to learn and improve is very much favored by employers.
Thanks, Jeff. And Gordon, as there's a flood of questions in and around the support structure that you are providing for some of those students in and around the gap year and how you guys are structuring it. Can you touch base a little bit more in terms of what you're doing for your students in that wraparound services or the primary care physician, as you kind of touched on?
Sure, and guide me as I go in case I'm too deep in one area or not another. But
Okay.
first of all, I mentioned there are tracks. There are sort of thematic tracks students can pick. Let's say education, I'll pick one. Student might have an interest in that as a potential area for themselves. Each area track has my colleague, a dean of the disciplinary area, overseeing that. So the dean of education has, first of all, already said, yes, I would love to sponsor that track for gap year. And there's a faculty member who raises their hand and says, I'm willing to be that mentor, and I will be assigned to any student who signs up for that track. And so the same process or equivalency occurs for the academic and the career option advising, and then a student peer mentor. Each of those individuals, I believe the faculty member does set up weekly appointments with the enrolled gap year student to have a standing meeting. And I don't know, I'm transparent with everyone, I don't know whether the others, I believe the career also, or the academic and the faculty member have standing meetings. And I think the peer and the career are more ad hoc or at the request of. Those faculty are the ones who pick the Coursera courses that make up those tracks. So it is faculty sort of blessed, if you will, which is an important point. I think many institutions are going to have faculty. Involving them in the process to the extent they're willing is a far more successful strategy. But I hope that answers the question. They're involved. This is in relationship. It's not in name only. And again, by starting quickly and early, 137 interests, we get a pool of 16. The real goal is how can we have, I believe there's a much larger market. So while we learn on 16, we're going to figure out how to scale from there. And I do recommend people be willing to lean in early, go small if you can, so you can scale. But either way, you'll figure out if there's a market for you in your area.
Now, you touched on a couple of things, and this could be either for you or for Jeff. And on the Coursera platform, there is the ability to do a lot of peer reviews, to work with your professor or TA. But and Jeff, maybe this is towards you a little bit more. But how is Coursera really helping to maintain the integrity of the grade evaluations and not just give a quick pass-fail without working through some serious challenges in the blended type environment? Is there anything specifically on the platform that you're seeing that could really help out some of these folks as they go through that?
Yeah, one of the things that's really helpful is that I mentioned there's 20 degrees, 21 degrees that our partners offer online. And this is University of Pennsylvania, University of Illinois, University of Michigan. I mean, big, highly credible institutions are delivering full degrees fully online on Coursera. You can bet they care a lot about academic integrity. What we've been doing is migrating a lot of the academic integrity features from these degree programs into Coursera for Campus. And we just made a big announcement in October of a slew of these things, these features that really help. So one of them, which is probably obvious, is anti-plagiarism. So we have built in direct integration with Turnitin. We not only give plagiarism similarity scores to the professors, but before a student submits their assignment, they'll get the similarity score. And if it's sufficiently high, the threshold could be set by the university that says, hey, before you submit this, I want you to know it looks a lot like something that's already been submitted. So anti-plagiarism is something that's fairly straightforward. We also, in many degree programs and also in many cloud certification certificates, professional certificates, there's proctoring. So we've integrated with ProctorU, and we have a number of different proctoring partners. So depending on how rigorous you want the proctoring to be, of course, the more rigorous, the more expensive it is. You can do fully digital proctoring. You can do live proctoring. You can do async proctoring. You can also do live in-person proctoring. We have a number of different examples there. So you can choose your own proctoring solution if you want to have proctored exams. And then the final piece, which is pretty important, and Gordon even touched on this, authoring private assessments is another great way to do it. We just came out with a question bank facility so that universities can kind of pick from a bank of questions and rotate those questions so that there's nobody else who can see those questions other than their own students. So public courses with private assessments is another way to ensure academic integrity. And we continue to really develop in this regard, because I'd say most universities are thinking, you know what, this is nice supplementary content, but where this is really going to be valuable is if we can deliver online learning for credit. That reduces our cost, increases our capacity, and academic integrity is a big part of that.
There's another quick question that kind of blends into this a little bit too, in and around helping professors as they start to develop their own content. Do we have any integrations into the backend platform to make it the teaching a little bit easier on them to actually bring their courses to light?
Yeah, the big thing that we see a lot of universities doing is they're actually starting by using Coursera for Campus for their faculty, especially in emerging markets. They're like, look, our faculty have never taught online. What better way to learn how to teach online and build online content than take some really good online content? And plus, faculty, you can imagine, are much more receptive to taking online courses from a Yale or a Duke or an Illinois, because they're like, hey, these are my people. These are other professors like me who've built this stuff. It's credible, it's high quality. By taking courses, professors can learn how to author courses. And we have a huge teacher training center and a group at Coursera called Teaching and Learning that actually does teach people, professors, how to create new content on Coursera, and a lot of content that allows them to create content tools that allow them to create content very easily. One that we just demoed, it was a prototype, so we're working on the production version. At the Zoom Global Conference in October, we demoed a feature called Zoom to Coursera. So you can literally take a Zoom meeting, click a button, and your lecture actually gets recorded on Zoom, but then a version of it gets recorded on Coursera. A course gets wrapped around it. You can then slice it into smaller chunks so that when you're using your Zoom to do lectures, you can also be building long-term online assets that will be the backbone of reusable online courses.
And this might be a good segue over to you, Gordon. One of these questions that constantly comes up is, how are students today adapting to this online blended model? And maybe you can kind of touch on how are your students dealing with this environment today that we're currently in?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually something I've just been thinking a lot about and talking a lot about with my colleagues. And again, I'm coming from a place of my university, so I'm not suggesting that these are your students for those on this call, but I'm very concerned, if I'm honest. We've relied heavily on switching over to vehicles like Zoom. And I think there's a lot of fatigue. I'm concerned there's a lot of fatigue and frankly, dissatisfaction among our students. That is not a statement about the effort that was involved by our faculty. I think our faculty have been putting in unbelievable amounts of effort to upskill, reskill themselves. For many of them, this is a new journey, like for all of us. So there is no concern about that. I think it's just at the end of the day, teaching online, I think, is bigger than Zoom. It's bigger than teaching or even this Zoom call. If I was an instructor who repeatedly for hours on end, even as interactive as I can try to make it, there's still better tools out there and technologies. So I'm actually not concerned with online as a modality. I'm concerned with the embodiment that we've been deploying out of the gate. And I'm really going to be curious to see what our spring enrollments look like. And I don't know if anyone else on this call also feels the same way. And because I think we've failed in a couple areas. One is, and again, not an act of commission, but just an omission, recognizing that the need to actually really think aggressively about how we not only learn how to teach online, but also with the best tools, designed the best way, curriculum design. And I think, again, I have no financial relationship to Coursera or anything, but I'm going to use it for this call. Coursera, and those that have gone before, that's a whole different league of quality and caliber than teaching online with Zoom. And the faculty who are teaching there and the partner universities, I think, understand that through those courses. The other additionally critical piece is I don't think we're stitching place-based education in a COVID world to porting that into online. So outside of the classroom, I had a student in a class, I'm teaching a class this fall, who said, I would give up all my in-person classes if we could just have a football game where students could go. And while we may like or not like football, whatever that is, the point was I'm missing the social experience that I believed place-based education was meant to offer. And so specifically to those of us on this call who represent campuses, I think we've failed or are at risk of failing to not recognize how important the non-co-curricular experience and stitching that together and using technology as well. And I don't know what those could be. I'm not a great creativity on this, but is it your gardening club has live Facebook Live, aggressively working to develop ways in which you're building those affinity groups? Because right now our students are facing periods of quarantine, food at the door. You know, it has a lot of mental health toll. And so I'm worried. I don't know if that fully answers the question, but I think as career professionals, it's an added layer of complexity, which goes back to other questions. And I think, you know, those of us on this call are deeply invested in wanting this next step to be successful for students. And COVID's throwing a wrench into it, but I believe we've got to be, our work is not done, not to channel Jeff Bezos, but there is no day two here. We've got to keep striving with the same level of aggressiveness to improve the experience if we're going to maintain relevance.
And you touched on another topic there, is the topic of the isolation challenge that a lot of folks are dealing with today, and how to communicate externally with maybe some of these employers that they're looking to go, because eventually they're going to have to leave school and try and go get that job. Are you guys doing anything today special, since we're talking to a lot of the career service folks here from the universities and the community colleges? Are you guys explaining your program, such as the Bronco Gap Year, or maybe some of the certificates or new innovative design ideas that you guys have? How are you communicating that externally to your local employers to kind of let them know some of the cool things that you guys are doing?
Well, one of our, I think our career office are good partners. A career office is critical in this partnership of an ecosystem of a university, but specifically the head start we've had is this Work You course, this whole curriculum where we already have 60 employers. We are in a metropolitan area, which is helping us. We do have some headquarters of companies who have been longstanding partners to us. But the message of credentials, skills and experience, that's both a medium in which we're on social media, we're advertising. I mean, we're on the mediums in which young and leaders exist, but it's also a local contact sport. And this is what I mean by that is we've got to be out talking. And I don't know what levels of shutdown people are in here nationwide, but the message is we're continuing our work. We're continuing to create job ready. We have these partnerships. Think about the Google certifications, whatever, Amazon certifications, Facebook, you name it, Facebook advertising, HubSpot inbound. These are all certificates, Google Analytics, Google Ads that we're very committed to ensuring. Some of that will, my hope is, will speak for itself, right? If you're certified, these are skills in demand. We're trying to make message that these are people ready. And I don't think I've cracked the code, but those are some of the pathways I'm trying to use.
Yeah, and I know that some of our employers are on the diversity and equity and inclusion issues. And Jeff, I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit, some of the challenges they run into there.
I will. There was a comment in the thread from Jeffrey Moss that I want to point to. Yeah, these hands-on projects, the students are telling us that these things are a great way to prepare for an interview. We're also really excited, and I'll put this out to the audience out there. If there is a local employer that hires a lot of your grads and they have a certain position they're trying to hire for, and there's certain software tools that they use, whether that's Salesforce or whether that's Google Sheets or Marketo, which is a marketing system. If you want to, we would be happy. We crank out these projects. Like I said, we have 800 of them now. We could build a local employer project that your students can take, kind of almost a project for spec, to make sure that your students have a chance to build a hands-on project that is particularly relevant to a specific local employer. So if anybody out there wants us to talk about building sort of specific local employer projects, we'd be happy to talk about that. JP, with respect to D&I, we have diversity and inclusion. We have a number of university partners. We've just expanded that. We haven't yet announced it, but we have just expanded that to include some HBCUs. We're very excited about that. We've been really ramping up as well the diversity of instructors who are authoring courses on Coursera. Clearly, lots of people know that a student seeing an instructor that looks, sounds, has come from the same place as they have, it's inspiring, it's confidence inspiring. And so we've been pushing really hard there. I will also tell you, like when we started, there is a ready-made set of courses that does exactly this. So if there's any school that's saying, God, it'd be nice to have a little bit more of a broad curriculum on history, social justice, social equity, diverse teams, we have a wide online catalog created by some of the best minds in academia. So we're certainly strong and getting stronger in that field, JP.
Perfect. And I don't know if you guys have in our last, couple minutes here, any final thoughts as we wrap up with everybody. I know we as a company have made sure that we are going to make Coursera for Campus accessible to every student, at least give them one free course, unlimited guided projects, and make sure that we can hopefully impact their lives in a positive nature. And go for it.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing, particularly with this audience. I'll make it quick, and then Gordon would love to hear your thoughts. At Coursera, we are allowing people to work remotely forever. You don't have to come to an office anymore. What that has done is it completely opened up the eligible talent pool. In a world where someone can learn anything from anywhere online and work in multiple digital jobs from anywhere online, suddenly students, graduates, they will have opportunities to learn things they couldn't have learned and get jobs they couldn't have gotten because the jobs don't have to be local. The future of jobs will be digital. More digital jobs will be distributed and remote. It's going to create a lot more opportunity. Gordon?
I would just close my thoughts with an appeal to this audience as peers in higher ed at different levels. I'm a big believer that economic justice involves both us addressing affordability and employability. And as a university with 30% first and family, a lot of rural, I think universities that want to ensure their relevance into the future are going to adopt a posture where we not just continue to deliver intellectual transformation and knowledge, but we also design what we do to, in effect, share in the ownership of the outcome of our students. Not just work on an input model where we get students 120 credit hours and then we believe that the world is your oyster, but fundamentally we see them through to that job for 95% of Boise State students who want to aspire to a college appropriate job or graduate degree level job, or the 5% that want grad school. Fundamentally, I think that is a prescription and hopefully a calling that we can work with our academic partners and ultimately third-party partners. The idea that we do it all ourselves on our campus and nobody else comes into the bubble, I really want to call into question that. I think there's so many phenomenal resources like a Coursera where we can do more faster, and better for our students. And that's what I know we're all in it for. So I want to thank everybody for having me.
Appreciate your time there, Gordon. Jeff, thank you for sharing it with the NACE audience. We really, truly do appreciate the hour that you guys did give us. So thanks again for your time, and look forward to speaking with anybody who has any questions about it. Feel free to reach out to myself or anyone from the team, and we have a link there with my contact information in it as well. So thanks again. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll now turn it back over to Meredith. Thank you.
Thank you, JP Moran and Coursera for Campus for a very informative session, and thank you participants for attending today's event. This recorded session will be made available following this session. This officially concludes the discussion, and you may now sign off.